Chapter 9. The Vaccine Illusion. In early 2020, as a mysterious new virus brought the world to a standstill, humanity clung to one overriding hope: a vaccine. This hope was so powerful that many came to see a COVID-19 vaccine as the single, final solution to the crisis. Headlines spoke of a race for a vaccine, and people imagined it as the magic bullet that would vanquish the virus and let normal life resume overnight. Even some scientists and officials, normally cautious by nature, publicly expressed optimism that a vaccine could stop the pandemic in its tracks, feeding the perception that it was only a matter of time before this nightmare ended. In those anxious months, the idea of a vaccine became almost an alluring illusion of salvation. Few paused to consider that this single tool, as crucial as it would be, might not instantly erase a global pandemic on its own. To turn this hope into reality, governments threw unprecedented resources at vaccine development. In an effort likened to the Apollo moonshot, labs and companies worldwide received billions of dollars to expedite their research. The United States launched Operation Warp Speed, a crash program that, by late 2020, had invested roughly $10 billion to fast-track COVID-19 vaccines. This was an unheard-of sum, reflecting the desperate urgency of the moment. Normally, creating a vaccine takes many years, often close to a decade. Under Warp Speed and similar initiatives elsewhere, that timeline was being telescoped into under a year. Companies began mass-producing vaccine doses even before trials finished, a calculated risk, so that if a formula proved successful, it could be rolled out immediately. Across the globe, research teams worked around the clock, buoyed by the faith that this was the way out. Money, manpower, and political will all converged toward one objective: a vaccine to end COVID-19. Amazingly, the science delivered, at least on its own terms. Vaccine prototypes were ready within weeks of the virus's discovery. Chinese scientists published the genomic sequence of the new coronavirus in January 2020, and virtually overnight, researchers everywhere took that code, essentially the virus's blueprint, and designed vaccines based on the original Wuhan strain. It was a triumph of modern biotechnology. Using advanced platforms, particularly messenger RNA, mRNA technology, scientists created vaccine candidates at a speed that was once unimaginable. As soon as we had the genetic sequence of the virus, we could make a vaccine, one immunologist marveled, a process that previously might have taken years. By the end of 2020, several vaccines had proven highly effective in trials. The first vaccines to emerge, Pfizer-BioNTech, Moderna, Oxford-AstraZeneca, and others, all targeted the spike protein of the original SARS-CoV-2 from Wuhan, training the immune system to recognize the virus's initial form. These breakthroughs were rightly celebrated. In clinical studies, the mRNA vaccines showed around 90 to 95% efficacy in preventing symptomatic COVID-19, results beyond researchers' wildest dreams. It truly seemed that science had conjured a miracle in record time. Yet this is where the story took a turn, one that revealed the illusion at the heart of the world's vaccine hopes. While scientists were designing and testing those first-generation vaccines, the virus was not sitting still. Viruses mutate. It's what they do to survive. Viral mutation is not an anomaly. It is an inherent feature of RNA viruses. Through 2020, as COVID-19 spread across continents, tiny genetic changes were accumulating. By late 2020 and early 2021, just as the first vaccine doses were rolling out, new variants of the virus began to rear their heads. The vaccines were designed for the first version of the virus from Wuhan. That original version of the virus was no longer the bigger threat. Most of the people at that time had self-made immunity against the original version of virus. The vaccine's blueprint matched the old spike protein of the virus, but now the virus had new forms, variants, like alpha, beta, and delta, with different spike proteins. The virus had evolved, but the vaccine had stayed the same. No country on Earth had a variant-specific vaccine available at the time when different variants drove catastrophic mortality during the second wave in many countries, including India. Suddenly, the world faced a moving target. In other words, vaccination alone would not be a magic wand, not in a landscape where the virus itself was evolving in real time. The pandemic had become a high-stakes race between our science and the virus's capacity to change. During the pandemic, the world behaved as if the coronavirus was the only enemy. But the truth was bigger and more complex. Many patients who became seriously ill were not harmed by the virus alone, but by secondary bacterial pneumonia that attacked already weakened lungs. We already had several tools that could have protected people: timely antibiotics for bacterial pneumonia, vaccines against serious bacterial infection like pneumococcal vaccines and Hib vaccines, and even the annual influenza vaccine, which reduces pneumonia and keeps hospitals free from extra burden. These were familiar, easily available, and already known to save lives by preventing exactly the kind of bacterial infections that worsened COVID-19 outcomes. Yet, in the worldwide rush toward a single goal, the new COVID vaccine, these other protective measures were pushed aside, barely discussed, and almost never promoted. The vaccine illusion, the belief that one swift jab could end the pandemic, shattered against the reality of an evolving pathogen. None of this is to say that vaccines were useless or a mistake. On the contrary, the COVID-19 vaccines have saved countless lives. But the events of 2020 to 2021 revealed that pinning all our hopes on the vaccine alone was a mistake of perspective. The vaccine was a powerful tool, but it was not a get-out-of-jail-free card for the pandemic. Other factors, the virus's mutations, the uneven distribution of natural immunity, and the availability of supplementary interventions, proved just as crucial in determining outcomes. The world learned, in a very hard way, that there was no single-step solution. Ending COVID's reign required multiple strategies used in concert. Vaccines, yes, but also treatments, and using every bit of medical knowledge we had, from basic hygiene to old vaccines for other illnesses. In the end, the illusion was not that vaccines don't work, they do, but that vaccines alone could let us close the book on COVID-19. Reality turned out to be more complex and humbling. As we move forward, this lesson remains vital. We can celebrate vaccines as a triumph of science, while also remembering that in a pandemic, flexibility and breadth of response are key. The story of COVID-19 didn't end with the first vaccine dose. And if there's one thing the vaccine illusion taught us, it's that we must be careful not to place all our faith in a single solution, however promising it may seem. The real world is always more complicated, and nature always has a few surprises in store. By recognizing that, we can be better prepared for whatever comes next.